Okay, so let's go. Welcome everybody. And I am so happy to be here with you this evening. I am here with Marnie Stein, and Marnie Stein is the principal of JPPS Elementary and co-head of school. Marnie is well known throughout the Montreal community in Jewish education. She brings to her job an impressive combination of personable attributes, professional expertise, and during the process of obtaining her Master's of Arts in Educational Leadership at McGill, Marnie was one of 15 individuals across North America selected to take part in a 15-month fellowship at the Day School Leadership Training Institute at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York City. She graduated that program in July 2012. She also has graduate certificate in educational leadership and a B.Ed, both from McGill. Marnie also won the Betty Walkman Yaffe Award for Excellence in Yiddish Language when she completed her undergraduate degree, fluent in English, French, Yiddish, and Hebrew, and fully trained as a level 1 educator in the International Baccalaureate Program, an internationally acclaimed curriculum that was introduced to Bialik. Marnie brings with her insights that spark innovation all throughout the school. You can find out more about Marnie by going on to the Bialik JPPS website. Marnie, I am here with you this evening. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Welcome. It is so wonderful to have you. Over the last number of weeks, I have been very fortunate in that I've been meeting with and interviewing various people from the worlds of Jewish education. To date, we have spoken to to Josh Pepin. I'm thinking of camp. I've got camp on my brain. We have spoken with Josh Pepin from the perspective of a summer camp. We have also spoken, my mind is going blank. Remind me, who else did we speak to?
We've spoken with Karen Gazit.
We spoke with Karen Gazit, thank you, from the perspective of children in the classroom today. I want to jump straight into this right away and to be able to see if we can ask you some of the questions that I know I have very much been wanting to look at. And to begin with, can you tell me a little bit about just where things are up to right now? Where is your school? How is everything going 8 months into a pandemic? These are incredible times, exceptional times, unique times. What does it look like for a head of school in charge of an elementary school and at the same time navigating a pandemic?
So these are definitely challenging times, no matter how many degrees you have, no matter what you studied in school. There definitely is no handbook for heads of schools in terms of how to navigate school during a global pandemic. But we make all our decisions the way we always do, which is with our students' best interests at heart. So when school closed back in March, we all knew this was coming, and it was only a matter of when. And we very quickly pivoted. We didn't want to miss a day, a moment with our students. So we were completely prepared. School closed on Friday. By Tuesday, all of our kids were in Zoom classes all day long. We had trained our teachers ahead of time knowing this was coming. And it was so important to us that we just stayed connected to our kids. And what we thought would be, like everyone else, what we thought would be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month somehow turned into all the way to June. So we needed to find ways to be able to stay connected to our kids outside of school also. So things like reading stories to them on Facebook at night, finding ways, different sort of events that our families could join on in Zoom, but making sure that we sort of never missed a moment to stay connected to our kids. And then this year, really we spent our summer planning for what school was going to look like, putting in as many safety protocols as we could.
Mm-hmm.
And we really say every day that our school is open, every day that our students are in the building with us is a win. Right. Our kids are so resilient. It's amazing. We had all these worries, parents and staff alike. How are the kids going to reintegrate? What's it going to look like? You should have seen that first day of school. They came bouncing into the schoolyard, beaming, just so happy to be there. And really, I owe so much to the staff who have been phenomenal about making sure that our kids feel safe and happy coming to school every day.
That's very interesting. I'd like to follow up on the two groups you mentioned, the kids on the one hand and the staff on the other. Talk to me about resiliency of children. We sometimes tiptoe around kids. We're on eggshells around kids. We're worried about overburdening them, the challenges that they face. Where would you say the kids are at? Tomorrow is December 1. So beginning of December, after a pretty touch and go first few months back since the school year began, talk to me about children's resiliency and where your kids are at today.
So I think we often don't give the kids as much credit as they deserve. Mm-hmm. School today understands a lot more than we think. And, by the time school reopened, they were accustomed to seeing people in masks and knowing the routines of washing their hands. So school wasn't such a scary place. But what we are noticing now is the amount of loss that the kids are feeling and are grieving. The loss of their extracurricular activities, the students who are involved in sports, the mm-hmm. students who are involved in theater or in music, the things for some students where academics is, an area where maybe they struggle. These are the areas where they shine and they cling to. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're seeing some of the struggle now, because they don't quite see the light. How come all these months later, I'm still not having my hockey games and my karate practices and my theater? But in terms of what it looks like in school, you would think it was a typical regular day. I think the stability and the security and the routine of a school day is so important to them, because that's sort of their safe space. Right. That's where they know what they can predict. So they've dealt with it, I think, a lot better than some of the adults around us do. Let
me flip the question over. Mm-hmm. How are the teachers doing? They are people too.
They are people too, and I think what people sometimes don't realize about teachers is, in other areas, we're being told, don't go into the workplace. Limit the number of people who are in the building, don't have more than 5 people in your office. And yet the expectation is that the teachers come in with a huge smile on their face, eager to encounter 600 people every single day. Right. But it was amazing. I think there was some nervousness, which is understandable, before the kids came into the building. And the minute the kids came into the building and the teachers and staff saw them, it's like all of that was forgotten. Yes, they know they have to, keep their distance and keep their guard up in terms of safety protocols, mm-hmm. but it was just all about the kids. And the teachers have a lot on their plates. They're teaching a hybrid model. They're teaching to the 20 kids who might be in the room in front of them and the 5 kids who might be on the Zoom screen, mm-hmm. who have medical exemptions or at home, and they're constantly flip-flopping back. And I think our teachers deserve an incredible amount of praise for what they're doing Absolutely. This year. Our kids' livelihood is really in their hands, and they're doing a superb job.
Absolutely. It's exceptionally challenging. It's exceptionally to stand in front of children in a classroom in and of itself is challenging. And people don't realize that. People think teaching is an easy job. People don't understand what goes into making a teacher in the 21st century and how they are constantly looking to better themselves, improve their craft. To do that simultaneously while trying to speak to a screen as well as the kids in front of you, it's an unenviable position that they're currently in. And I think we don't give enough credit to teachers. If I can focus the conversation Jewishly, and take a look at JPPS, not specifically, but rather you to give me your thoughts and opinions globally in terms of Jewish education, whether that be in Montreal, and let's focus on Montreal. You yourself are a perfect model of the student who comes out the system being quadrilingual: Hebrew, French, English, and Yiddish. That is the top of the tree, let's say. Certainly from a language perspective. I won't ask you how your math skills are, but I remember you were the head of the math department prior to becoming the head of school.
My math is better than my Yiddish, I won't lie.
So, head of the math department and quadrilingual, you have had the best of what a Jewish education can provide, Jewishly, culturally, and also secularly. For a family today that is torn, we are not talking about those who are absolutely going to a secular school. And we're not talking about those families who are absolutely, no question about it, going to a Jewish school. Talking about a family, many in my community, I'm sure many in yours, that perhaps their parents went to a Jewish school. Perhaps even if they didn't, they see the value in sending their children to a Jewish private school, and they are weighing up the pros and cons. They are seeing the options available to them. What is it about a Jewish private school that is going to make it a better choice than the alternative?
So I think a lot of people have this misconception that by going to a Jewish day school, they're sacrificing something, and I hear that a lot when I meet with parents. Well, what will my child miss out on because you have these hours of Jewish studies? And I think there's that misconception that you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You don't have to have either strong Judaics or a strong secular education, but the two actually meld perfectly together. Jewish education Judaism is all about questioning, right? And deep thought. We're supposed to question things. We're supposed to think critically when we look at our texts. And that's the best way to get our students engaged. When students learn from an inquiry-based approach where they're asking the questions, they want to stick around and hear the answers. Right. So I think, people who went to Jewish day school maybe many years ago and felt that something was lacking, we'll often hear, my French wasn't strong enough, and therefore I worry about that for my children. We have evolved so much from that time. We're so fortunate in Montreal. We have an amazing Jewish day school system and so many options. But, I could speak of my school. The French program is so strong. The students are learning French as a mother tongue and writing that mother tongue exam, that ministry exam at the end of grade 6. They're learning English as a mother tongue. And on top of that, they're learning where Jewish studies fits in all of this. So they're coming out with such a rich education on all fronts. I think, we believe very much that we need to expose our students to the foundations of Judaism for them to learn the traditions, the culture, the history, and only then can you choose your own Jewish path. But how can our students, in the future, choose that path if their exposure has been so limited?
Absolutely. It's a really important point. I think can I use a strong word in a public debate? I think I cringe a little when I hear parents tell me that they don't want to send their children to a Jewish school because they want to give them as much choice as possible, deciding who they want to be later on in life. And when I hear that line, I try as best as I can to argue the point with the parents that it's only by giving them a full sense of their private identity will they ever be able to make any informed decision, because nobody is an island. Nobody is this created, growing up in a vacuum to the point where I can now make an objective decision of what and who I wish to be in my life. We understand in terms of identity forming, the person who knows who they are can then be strong in choosing how they want to live their life. And that actually segues beautifully onto the next question that I would like to ask you. What does it look like at the end? Let's say you've got this sweet, precious kindergartner coming in, and they are a blank slate. Although if they've gone through the CPE, if they've gone through preschool, I would hope they do know a smattering of Hanukkah songs and they do know the Manish Tana. But we've got this elementary kindergartner, day one, and you are going to mold and fashion their journey so that they come out at the other end. What do they look like? What are the Jewish big goals that you have for such a student? And I don't mean the specific now. The big picture, big goals, what do they look like?
So, as you said, grounded in that foundation, really having a deep understanding, much more than sort of surface level. Like, yes, it's wonderful, as you said, to say the manishtana, but the pride that I see on the parents' faces when they do this model Seder in grade 4 and they realize, my child can lead the Seder. I can't even lead the Seder, but my child can. It's so much more than just surface level. We dip apples in honey. We know a couple of holiday songs, but that they really know all of the chagim, all of the holidays, the prayers that are associated, that they have an understanding of, Parshat HaShavua, of the weekly Parsha, but that they delve deep into certain Torah portions that they want to continue their education. For me, first and foremost, I need my students to love what they're learning. Then we can move mountains academically. So to create this love of their religion, of their traditions, no matter how they celebrate at home, no matter what their family specific
how do you do
practices
that?
are.
How do you do that? How do you get them to love what they're learning? It sounds amazing.
Right.
Let me push you a little.
Sure.
How do you do that?
So first and foremost, it comes from the staff, having a staff who is so passionate about what they're teaching, that passion is contagious.
Right.
Our staff love what they do and they love being in that class and they love what they're able to teach to their students. This weekend, Saturday night, we had our Havdalah Chagiga for our third graders. Similar to this, sort of all our families were on Zoom. And the kids were really, leading the whole evening, explaining the significance of Havdalah and leading them through start to finish. And we received emails from parents who said, because my child has been coming home teaching us and learning about Havdalah in school, we now do it every Saturday night. It is not something that was our family's practice. We're not particularly observant, but that's it. You ignite the passion in the kids so that it doesn't end at 4:15 when that bell rings, but it goes back into their homes. We also make it relevant. We're, at our school, we're an international baccalaureate school where all the disciplines work together to create these transdisciplinary units. So the kids are no longer seeing Jewish studies in its own vacuum or silo, but how it really is integrated into every other part of their life. And when it's relevant and there are experiential, hands-on experiences, those are the things they remember, not the workbook that they filled out. But those traditions, learning about having a challah bake with all of our families together in the school, learning about these customs, not in theory, but in practice.
I love that. I think that's so important. I think Jewish education has to be a lived experience. And I was speaking to Josh, I think it was last week, talking about how does Havdalah become something that's done not just at camp. Havdalah is so important for the few weeks of the summer around a lake. But can Havdalah become every Saturday night around the dinner table? And those are some of the great big challenges. I think one of the largest of challenges is the use of technology and new and innovative ways of being able to convey the material in a fashion that keeps up to date with children themselves. I am blessed to have a 3-year-old in my house. She sometimes will run around and sometimes she'll do a whole bunch of weird and wacky things. One of the things she is particularly adept at is swiping with her finger like this. She knows how to turn on an iPad. She knows when the YouTube icon has been deleted and something's missing, which is a very big one in our house. And I think she knew how to say Netflix before she knew how to say many other words in her vocabulary. I don't know if that's a good thing. I want to be able to give her, now these are tools, these are just kalim, these are the methods and approaches, the utensils with which we are conveying the information. But how does a child who is bedazzled with all of the best aspects of technology, and let's face it, some of the worst as well. The kid is going on to their PlayStation for 5-6 hours straight on a weekend. A kid is checking their text messages before they do anything else when they wake up in the morning. How do we take the kids' natural habitat, which is being digital natives, and bringing the Judaica along so that it does not become outdated? How do you square that circle? Can you make that challenge one that you can succeed at?
Wow, there's so much to unpack there, both the challenges of technology. I mean, there's so much positivity that comes out of it, but there are definitely some challenges too. And then the integration of, as you said, of Judaica. So, you know, from a very, I'll give just a few examples. Like there are so many ways, because that is what the kids are used to, right? This is their lifeline. And I think some of it is, you know, we have to put in some boundaries into that lifeline because there are so many exciting, wonderful experiences for them out there that don't involve technology. You know, we spend so much time teaching our students from a young age about making eye contact with people and the importance of, you know, looking someone in the eye and saying good morning, because we found the last few years that a lot of our students were losing that because they're so used to looking at this and looking down that they now have to be taught the importance of looking people in the eye. So I think one of the important things is for it to be purposeful, for it not to be the go-to all the time. But, you know, we have our as educators, we have to think, why are we bringing in technology at this moment? Is it because it's the easy fallback, or is it because there's really something integral with the technology, so that it's not just, you know, go on your iPad. So we were teaching, you know, for Tu B'Shvat, we were teaching about Shivat Haminim, about the different species. And so in their coding class, they each took one of the species and they sort of coded it to make it animated and added the Hebrew vocabulary to it, so that there was some learning associated. And then this was, you know, part of the end goal to make it kind of exciting. So whether that's in coding, right now we have a group who are doing a dreidel competition where they are studying different figures in Jewish history and deciding which one they want to be represented on their dreidel. And then through their STEM class and their science class, they're designing the dreidel that will have the greatest amount of spin. And in art class, they're putting an artistic component to the different sides of the dreidel so that it's relevant and it speaks to them and speaks to their excitement with technology. But at the same time, there's learning at a higher level that's happening. But to go back to your, I believe you're sort of asking, you know, how do we navigate this, as it's wonderful that our kids are so adept.
And yet at the same time, is it hurting more than helping? Are we missing something by instantly jumping to hand out technology in the classroom when perhaps we as the institution haven't caught up to best maximize its usage?
So, you know, we specifically, while we have enough devices for all our students, we don't give every student a device. So our teachers have to think about, when they're planning their lessons, when they want to use the technology, and then they book it to be brought into the class. And it's not because we don't have enough devices. It's because we really want to make sure that that's not what our kids are doing all day long. That conversation is happening, that discussion is happening, that reading from an actual book with real pages is happening, so that there is real thought put behind it. But there's a big responsibility that we have of teaching our kids how to navigate it properly. And I think one of the biggest obstacles we have has to do with supervision. So I'm not talking just sort of in the school, because yes, a
What
teacher is
does that
walking
mean?
around.
Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. So when you think about, we talk about this all the time at school, when you think about getting your driver's license, you would never, ever give your kids the keys to the car without any lessons and say, the highway is that way, go, just go. There are lessons. You need to be supervised, right? You need to have a permit for a year where there is a competent driver beside you watching your every move.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we give the kids the keys to the information highway and we say, here's an iPad, go. But are we supervising them as parents? Are we making sure that we know where they're going? Are we making sure that they know which sites are appropriate and which are not? They're not ready yet developmentally to have this piece of technology that can literally take them anywhere. They are not ready to have that on their own. And I know how easy it is to say, here you go, just go play on an app. But very quickly, that app can become something really dangerous. And I think we tell our parents and our staff all the time, they need to be in the view of an adult. Don't hand them those keys and just hope for the best and then be surprised when they encounter something that's, dangerous.
So you're teaching them a technological safety as a way of even training them how to be using this technology in the first place.
Exactly. When our kids are in the schoolyard as educators, we know to walk around and listen to the conversation, make sure nobody's being left out, make sure that no one's feelings are being hurt. And yet often, parents will give them a device and will allow them to go onto these chats, and nobody's watching and nobody's guiding them. They still need us to help them make the right decisions and the right choices. So that supervision is so, so critical until you really feel like, okay, they're ready now.
Do you think by the time that they are no longer supervised, they are indeed mature and ready for it? What age are we talking about? Let me just give you an example. At what age is a child today given a cell phone with all access to all of the internet and all apps? How old is such a child?
Unfortunately, it's happening earlier and earlier. We're seeing students we used to see students in high school starting with their cell phones, and okay, you sort of understand kids are taking public transportation, they're walking, they're biking to school, mom and dad want to make sure they're okay. It's a bit of a lifeline. Then we were starting to see kids coming with cell phones in elementary school. Students, I'll speak to even colleagues at other school, students in grade 3. I don't know, mom and dad there's a carpool waiting for them outside of school. I'm not really sure who they have to call during the day and who they need to get in touch with. We put in a very strict policy. There is no need for it. So if you're bringing it to school, it goes in the office in the morning, the minute you walk in, and you don't get it until the end of the day and can only turn it on when you're off school property. But there's no good reason for a child in elementary school to have it.
But what happens when a grade 3 student, that's 8 years of age?
Yes.
So what happens when a grade 3 student is speaking outside of school in a group chat, easily leaving out 1 to 5 different friends from their social circle? How would anyone be able to control bullying? How would anyone be able to control, even if it's not necessarily the nastiness of intentional bullying, but simply leaving others out?
Mm-hmm. And is definitely a form of bullying.
That's a behavioral aspect. And then what does that do to attention spans? What does this do to attention spans? She might kill me, but she's not watching, and I don't think she's going to. So I'll give you an example of my 12-year-old. Although my wife might not appreciate me.
The 3-year-old might be watching, so I bet.
That's true. So
she might tell on you.
Without going into exactly why, we took away the phone one evening from my 12-year-old. Mm-hmm. And I have never seen her do better work, more consistently focused work. And I said to my wife, we had a conversation afterwards, why would we ever let our child have access to a phone while she would be doing her homework? And she explained to me that there is collaborative work that is being done, and that today high school students are working in very different ways than I grew up with, and maybe I'm not able to appreciate it so instantly or so simply or quickly, yet there is this almost collaborative, ongoing dynamic where work is being done and one is speaking to another through Snapchat, through text, through Messenger, through whatever the medium might be. And yet at the same time, it was clear as day just how powerfully a focused span of concentration was able to be achieved once the technology was taken away. So bullying and behavioral issues that leads from technology, and concentration issues in terms of attention spans. Can you speak to this point, please?
So in terms of the concentration, I think, the kids, even at high school, they need their parents to set those limits. And I think it's a sense of relief. They may not admit it to you in the moment. I don't know that your daughter necessarily did in that moment, but they find themselves...
By relief, you mean tears? Yes. No. That was a joke.
I know. They need somebody else to put in those boundaries, because there is that addiction, that fear of missing out, that I can't stop myself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they know that it's a pull, right? They know that it's distracting them. So it's much easier to be able to blame your parents, to say, oh, it's my father's fault that my phone's being taken away, so that they don't have to be the ones that have to disconnect from their friends. Unfortunately, today they do need those phones in high school. They do need that lifeline. That is how kids socialize today. And by taking it away completely, not just for a few hours, but completely, as some parents tend to do, you're really cutting them off from from their social lives. And that puts them in an even tougher situation when they go back to school the next day, because they are missing out. So I think the boundaries is important. Okay, what is it that are your homework assignments tonight? I understand that for this is a collaborative project and it's group work, but when you're studying for your math test, you really don't need to be collaborating with anyone, or for your science test. So for those 2 hours, the phone is being put in the other room, because they hear that beep. They hear that phone vibrate, and they can't stop themselves from turning and grabbing it. They need you. They need their mother to take it and put it in the other room. But for specific periods of time, from 8 to 9, I want you working independently. We're taking it away. Then you can have it back, or whatever the times may be. In terms of the bullying that you spoke of.
And especially you said a grade 3, that surprised me. And I'm so happy to be having this conversation with you, because I am not in a school. I'm in a shul, and I want to be as informed as I can be, and having an ear to the ground through these types of conversations, speaking with people that are in the trenches, literally, giving 8-year-old cell phones is a surprise to me. So what is the negative consequences of those decisions?
I will say to parents all the time, no good comes of that. What good could possibly come of giving a child that piece of technology where they have access to so much, and they don't need it at that age? When I think of growing up, and if I had an argument with a friend, if I felt left out of something, whatever the drama was that happened in school that day, when you went home, you were at peace, because it was at least over for the day. Yes. What's hard for these kids is if they have that piece of technology, it's never over. So a child, whether it be in high school, who was involved in some sort of drama with friends and comes home, then they're all texting each other about it. Then, as you said, they're being left out about it. And so what we're finding the greatest challenge is there's no break. There's no break from it. And that's probably what we're seeing can be potentially most damaging to kids today, that they can't be cut off. So,
and adults too.
And we see the implications of the adults who aren't really present for their kids. They're at the supper table with them, but they're scrolling. I mean, I'm guilty of it. You hear that beep, there's an email, it must be something from work, let me go check. We all now say, cell phones away, it's dinner, let's all be together, because parents aren't realizing you're there, but you're not really there. And we're hearing kids coming to us and saying, I want to spend more time with my mom. I want to spend more time with my dad. But whatever we're doing, they're glued to their phones. So
very, very sad. And it's certainly tragic, and it doesn't look like it's getting better. It actually looks like the challenge is growing.
You know, I've seen some good come out of, as many of us have, out of this pandemic. You know, families are together more. There's more quality time happening. The wonders of technology is that Bubby and Zadie, who are so isolated right now,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we saw this Saturday night, they were all zoomed in to see their kids, their grandkids Chagiga, and they were beaming. And we were saying, thank God for the technology and the connection. As we're all isolated from our grandparents and the extended family, at least we can be together for this. Families seem to be appreciating more dinner time. You know I'm home more for dinner than I used to be. And this started with the isolation when we were all working from home and realized this is really nice that we're not running and rushing places. We're not rushing to take this one to a tutor and that one to a music lesson. As much as I said earlier, you know, there's some grief associated with that. There's also some wonderful family time that has come around from that, and some togetherness. So I think some people are starting to realize some of the simpler things in life. And appreciate those things.
Yeah. I think that with the state of technology today, especially how not just children but adults have become so dependent on their cell phones, one of the most liberating of all institutions has got to be Shabbat. And I know that come Friday afternoon, now it's extremely early in these winter months. We are in the end of November, beginning of December. These are the weeks where it doesn't get any earlier. I think Shabbat comes in at 3:55 this Friday. That makes for a very short day for everything to be ready. When I push the off button on my phone, and I have to show my daughter that it actually comes with an off button. She didn't believe me.
They don't know it exists.
But you have to look on the top. It's hidden. It's very hard. But if you look, you see there's an off button. But when I push that off button, my shoulders just go down, and there's an exhale. There's a physiological response. Now that's terrible. That itself is so telling. But the pressures of the world, the phone calls, God forbid the funerals, or just the crises, the bar and bat mitzvah, the life of it's not just a rabbi, it's anybody. The life of anybody today is dealing with, this is important, it has to get dealt with now, and emergency. You can do anything. You can be in any career. You can be in any career, no matter how essential, no matter how laid back. And the switching off of that phone is physiological for me. I am relaxed. I'm instantly relaxed. I've exhaled. My shoulders drop. And the saddest point of the week is 25 hours later. Because what am I? I'm now putting every Havdalah onto Facebook Live. And I have to tell you, there is an ongoing debate with my wife. Why do we have to, immediately when Shabbat comes, it's like a cigarette. No, I'm not a smoker, but it's like a cigarette. It is that if you've ever seen somebody who keeps Shabbat, who smokes, they're taking that cigarette from the Havdalah candle. So there is this debate. Should we be putting Havdalah straight away onto Facebook? Now it happens that some strange reason, whenever we do that, somebody then calls me up immediately that Saturday night and says, I'm really happy you did Havdalah on Facebook. I love watching your Havdalah. So I guess there's enough of a reason for it to keep going. But
there is, your community needs it, and it gives them comfort and it gives them connection.
But incredibly, it is the greatest advertisement for Shabbat. The world of technology that we live in and what it has done to us. I don't think there's ever been a time in human history where we have needed Shabbat more. It used to be we took Shabbat because we were slaves in Egypt. And when we left slavery, we needed a day of rest. There's an ancient legend actually that says that Moshe instituted a request to Pharaoh to give the slaves 1 day off a week. So even in Egypt, before they were even freed, Shabbat used to be a day from back-breaking slave labor. Now, Shabbat is a day free from our back-breaking devices that have locked us into their own prison. And what a sad.
It's sad. You know, we're on a treadmill all the time. Yeah. We're always concerned, what are we missing out on? One more email, one more, I just have to check one more time. And I know when Shabbat comes and I put my phone away, I so agree with you. What you just breathe. It's like, now I have permission to say, I'm not answering you.
That's it.
But why don't we ever give ourselves permission the rest of the week to say, you know what, I need to be with my family now. So I'm giving myself permission to take a rest from this. Yeah. Why is it only on Shabbat? If we can allow Shabbat to do that, we should be able to allow ourselves to do that beyond Saturday.
Very well said. Let me look future orientated with you. I'm changing subjects a little now. And the theme of this series was Jewish education in 2021. Now, it didn't just mean next month in 2021, but for the future. With, please God, a pandemic that will be behind us, with the pros that we have now incorporated into our reality of what technologically we have become opportunistically available to us. There's certainly been some great things that have now been added to our lives, and educationally, certainly that is true. What does education look like Jewishly? And here I want to try to pin you down Jewishly. What is the future of Jewish education? And let's say here in Montreal, what do you believe that looks like? Some of the main trends, some of the important aspects that we're going to be seeing in the next 5 years, perhaps.
So I think one of the greatest values that we have seen this year that will continue, and it's why I've seen, even just over the summer, the number of families who've reached out who weren't considering a Jewish education before and have either reached out for future years or wanting to, you know, switch their children into a Jewish school if they weren't in before, is people realizing the value of community, the value of connection, the value of needing to depend on one another and feeling part of sort of a bigger family of people who are looking out for you, and a place where there's a sense of belonging, a place where they know that they and their children are counted and valued, and they're not just sort of a number, sort of, you know, or just moving through this educational journey because that's what their child has to do, but that there's a reason why they belong here. And I think people are really seeking out that sense of belonging that maybe wasn't so important to them before. So I think we're going to see more of that, more of the value of community building, more of bringing families into the education. So that doesn't start and stop with a child, but how are we bringing the education to the families, be it, you know, regarding things like you said about technology, or just Jewishly engaging our parents way more than we did in the past.
Is that because the parents are themselves, for whatever reason, there's a lack in their own Jewish education, and that at the same time as educating the children, you feel that there's a whole family component that needs educating? Would you say that's true?
I think there's one of two things, either a lack in their own education or a lack in meaningful education. So in other words, you know, they may have learned things either on a surface level or, you know, or even if they had been in a Jewish day school, that maybe it didn't get quite to their core. They kind of went through their classes and they learned, whether it was Torah or Talmud or whatever they may have learned, but it didn't sort of impact their hearts and their souls.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what they're looking for. And for many of them, they're coming back because they realize that this is not something that they had the opportunity for or the privilege of, but they're seeing it through their kids' eyes, and they realize just how much it's bringing to them and then to their families, that they want to learn more. So I think that's definitely, a trend that we're going to continue to see, that the sense of belonging is now way more important than maybe it was several years ago. I think families are valuing the divergent thinking that comes from Jewish education, the ability to take in different perspectives, and to know that even their family can belong. It's not just sort of one type of family that fits into that Jewish education mold, but whatever your family looks like, there's a place for you here. And I think that's important to them. And I think they realize what we're seeing a lot in Jewish education is the attention to the individual child, the noticing each child's journey. We've come such a long way. I remember even in my time hearing so often, like a 3-language school is just too hard for your kid, or they're not meant to be in this trilingual environment and with the added pressure of the Jewish education. That's not true anymore. We've evolved so much that I think more families are finding a place for their children, that they, that we manage the goals together. So maybe becoming a fluent Hebrew speaker isn't their goal, but they will be well-versed in tefillah. They will be well-versed in Torah. So knowing that Jewish education can touch so many more, I think, in the future than they have in the past. It's not just for that top-level student who can handle it all, but that if it's important to the family, our schools now know better and know how to make it work. And I think we're going to see more of those trends of more diverse learners in our Jewish day schools than we have before. We're seeing it already now. And that's a trend that's definitely going to continue.
That's great. What would you say, the flip side of that same question, what's going to be the biggest challenge in the next 5 years for Jewish schools here in Montreal?
The biggest challenge for Jewish schools here in Montreal, it's probably what the biggest challenge is when I speak to friends of mine who are heads of schools all over North America, particularly coming off COVID, as families have fallen maybe on more difficult financial times. It's wrapping their heads around, paying for a Jewish education. And is this something that our family can do? And is this something that, our families have all made sacrifices I made sacrifices sending my kids to Jewish day schools. But that was okay. It was worth it. And I would do it 100 times over. But I think that is going to be the biggest challenge, is making it accessible to as many families as possible. We are so fortunate here that our federation has seen this as an essential goal of theirs, that they want to make Jewish education accessible to as many families as possible, and for the finances to not always have to be the reason. Right. And when I see what people are paying in Ontario and in the States, and they hear what our tuition is, and that we have these programs through Federation to help middle income families be able to afford by having, their tuition capped, and the tuition assistance programs that are being offered from the schools to make it accessible to so many. There's such tremendous hope. How fortunate are we that we have a federation who, and a Jewish community who has so many needs, right? Whether it's our elderly population, whether it's, families who are really struggling below the poverty line, and still they know that the future of our Jewish community is in the hands of our current students who are our future leaders, and the importance of giving them a Jewish education, and that they've invested in that despite all the other things they have to invest in. It's a challenge, but we are so incredibly fortunate here. We really are. We're very blessed.
That's wonderful. Well, I do know who is especially blessed, and that is the teachers and the students at your school. You are an exceptional role model to so many, Marnie, and I thank you so much for being on with me here this evening, for answering my questions, and for helping to frame what the future might look like, some of the challenges, and certainly what the opportunities for Jewish education is in our community. So I thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you
I
so much.
wish you continued good luck and success with the next few weeks, and then you've got a wonderful winter break that you deservedly have waiting for you.
We'll try to make Shabbat extend a few more days over that break and unplug and just take some deep breaths. I feel extremely fortunate for the role that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I love going to work every day and seeing my students every day. So thank you for allowing me to share some of my passion with you this evening. And thank you for all that you do for our community, because I know the dedication that it takes to do that Havdalah every Saturday night when your family is pulling and needing you, but your community is really so appreciative. You're giving them so much. So thank you.
That's very kind of you. Marnie Stein, thank you so much. And I wish you a good night and a very successful rest of the school year. Good luck, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.